Aloha students, and welcome to your first flipped classroom lecture of this year. Now feel free to pause and restart whenever you need to. I'm going to ask you to label some maps later on, and it might be easier if you pause in order to label those and then restart the lecture as you go. And don't forget, one of the benefits of this is that you can rewind and start over to review. Just make sure that you're ready to come to class and that you especially know the definition of isolationism and who served on which side of the war, who played on which side. I'm going to take myself off the webcam now so you'll just hear my voice because it takes up too much of the screen and you won't be able to see the maps or the picture. All right, we're ready to start with the two sides of World War I. After the Spanish-American War, the United States became a world power, and this you should be aware of from our last unit. The U.S. gained the territories of Guam, the Philippines, and Puerto Rico, and decided that they wanted to expand their interest in foreign affairs, and foreign means around the world. As a result of these developments after the Spanish-American War, the U.S. decided it would no longer be an isolationist nation, that they would no longer avoid conflicts around the world. So that term is isolationism. They are isolating themselves from conflicts taking place around the world. After the Spanish-American War, the United States decided that it would get more involved in foreign affairs, and World War I officially ends the United States' avoidance of conflicts that took place in Europe. Before this time, the U.S. said, stay on your side, we'll worry about what's going on in the Americas. We don't want to have anything to do with the conflicts that are taking place in Europe. But World War I ends that when the U.S. decides to get involved. Now, what are the two sides to this war? It is the Central Powers versus the Allied Powers. And I pictured a few leaders for you on this slide. In a moment, we'll talk about which countries made up which side. The majority of those countries are in Europe. The one who is not is the United States. One of the main leaders is Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, of the German Empire. And two of the main leaders of the Allied powers are David Lloyd George of the British Empire and Woodrow Wilson, who was President of the United States at the time. And some of you will be researching these more in depth for your newscast presentation. All right, now we come to what countries make up the Central Powers. Those four main nations are the German Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire. Now I'm going to ask you to locate them on your map. I'm going to flip to a slide right now that shows you where each one is. Make sure that you label them in red. So here's a map of Europe before World War I in 1914. This is a picture of the continent of Europe. Notice that it looks a little bit different than the modern day map of Europe. That's because after 1914, many of these empires were broken down into smaller countries. So make sure you label the German Empire in red, the Austro-Hungarian Empire in red, Bulgaria in red, and the Ottoman Empire in red. And these are the four major countries or nations that are on the side of the Central Powers in this war. So feel free to pause the presentation at this time if you need more time to fill out your map, and then restart again as soon as you're ready to move on. What countries are the Allied powers? We have the British Empire, France, Russia, Serbia, Belgium, and the United States. The main ones we'll be talking about in class are the British Empire, France, and the United States, and a little bit about Russia. Now I would like you to label those in blue on your map. So you should have filled in red the German Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire at this point, and those were the Central Powers. Now we're going to move on to the Allied powers. You have Russia, you have Serbia. Then you also have France, you have Belgium, and you have the British Empire, which you notice is separated from the continent of Europe by the English Channel. and this will serve to protect Britain from a lot of the conflicts that are going on the continent. So take a moment, please, to label those spots on your map. I also indicated that the United States is much further west than Europe on the North American continent with that arrow, and you may mark that if you would like. So pause if you need to, otherwise you can continue and then restart. Don't forget to make a map key. Remember that you labeled your Central Powers in red and Allied Powers in blue. Make sure you mark that on your map so that you don't forget. Don't forget to come prepared to class tomorrow to know who were the Central Powers and who were the Allied Powers. And we'll continue our discussion in class. I hope you enjoyed your first flipped lesson, and I look forward to seeing you in class tomorrow. So come prepared with your maps totally filled out, and see you tomorrow. Bye.